Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. Around 200 buildings have now been damaged near Halifax as emergency crews continue to battle devastating wildfires. Meanwhile, here in Alberta, wildfires have increased in the northern part of the province, with many classified as being out of control. We have an update from Alberta Wildfire. And the mayor of Mississauga wants to change the lyrics of O Canada to better support reconciliation.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Residents just outside of Halifax, Nova Scotia are awaiting word on the fate of their homes as fire officials say the return of dry, windy conditions could lead to a reburn in the evacuated areas. Local officials say at least 200 structures, most of them residences, have been damaged or destroyed by wildfires.
How the fire burned yesterday, I referred to it as a dirty burn. And basically what a dirty burn is when a fire comes through an area, it burns so hot and so quickly that it kind of hopscotches from place to place. When it does this, the radiant heat from the fire is still there drying those fuels that are left. So there are large patches of unburned fuel in the middle of the actual fire perimeter. And that is what makes this situation so precarious. To have a measurement on that is, I couldn't even begin to guess on an actual measurement for that, but there is a significant amount of fuels left within the actual fire perimeter. We are working shoulder to shoulder with our colleagues with HRM Fire. One of our main objectives for this operational period is structure protection. So we do have crews in the field who are constantly patrolling and looking for additional areas of concern. They're reporting that right back to our operations section, and any type of attack like initial attack or water or anything that is needed is implemented in a relatively quick fashion.
Meanwhile, here in Alberta, emergency officials say the fire danger is still quite high in the northern regions of the province. There are currently 64 active wildfires burning in the forest protection area. Of those fires, 18 are classified as out of control, 19 are being held, and 27 are under control. There's still very poor air quality in many regions north of Edmonton. There are 5 evacuation orders still in place, with just over 3,500 people evacuated. The province now has around 2,600 personnel working on the fires, including firefighters from across Canada, the United States, Australia, and New Zealand. Members of the Canadian Armed Forces are also helping out. Christy Tucker from Alberta Wildfire says a new fire located north of Fort McMurray is of particular concern.
One new wildfire that started on Sunday near Fort Chipewyan has grown relatively quickly and is now our #1 priority wildfire. It's roughly 3,000 hectares in size and is 13 kilometers away from the community of Fort Chipewyan. We have crews and aircraft working on that fire, with more on the way. Fortunately, today, winds in the area are light and are blowing away from the community.
Well, here in southwestern Alberta, we enjoyed another beautiful day. Jeanette Rocher is in with a quick peek at the forecast. Jeanette, we had better sneak in a quick barbecue now since showers may be arriving fairly soon.
Yeah, sooner than you realize that we can actually see the potential of some showers developing this evening, along with the risk of a thunderstorm. That should all be developing around 8 p.m. this evening, and that risk should remain right through overnight until about 5 a.m. is when those risks of thunderstorms developing should end. But that the shower activity should remain. We're looking at a 30% chance right through Thursday until Thursday afternoon, when the sun will peek out behind those clouds. And hell, it does look like we could see some shower activity on the weekend as well. I'll be back later in the show to give you all those details.
Thanks so much, Jeanette. Looking forward to the rain to water my garden. MPs voted in favor of asking David Johnston to step down from his role, leading a probe into allegations of foreign interference. The motion brought forward by the NDP passed in the House of Commons 174 to 150. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau appointed Johnston in March to look into allegations that China meddled in the last 2 federal elections. Trudeau, however, says Johnston is still the best man for the job.
as the report shows, has taken this incredibly seriously and gathered all the intelligence necessary. What we've highlighted is that that intelligence is available for the leaders of the opposition parties to avail themselves of, to understand what underpins the very good report that Mr. Johnston put out, and the fact that they're choosing to be able to continue to play partisan games instead of getting read into the actual facts of the matter. You will notice that the opposition parties are not emphasizing any disagreements with the actual report or conclusions, particularly because they refuse to get the necessary briefings that are being offered to them to be able to understand and accept or disagree with those conclusions. They're continuing to do ad hominem attacks, personal attacks against David Johnston.
The non-binding NDP motion asks Johnston to step aside and calls on the Trudeau government to instead launch a public inquiry on the issue. Ontario Conservative MP Melissa Lantsman says the federal government needs to hold that public inquiry into foreign interference of our federal elections. Lantsman echoed the words of her leader Pierre Poilievre and NDP leader Jagmeet Singh, saying Canadians deserve answers now.
David Johnston should not be the special rapporteur. There shouldn't be a special rapporteur. There needs to be an independent public inquiry, and it needs to happen today. The only thing that could possibly restore trust in this place is a real investigation into political interference, and the only people who believe that that shouldn't happen are these Liberals. I want to know from the minister, what will it take for him to listen to Canadians being harassed by a dictatorship, listen to the members of this House who were targeted? What will it take for him to end the cover-up?
If that member opposite had been paying attention, she would have noted that we did a public consultation on the creation of foreign agent registry by listening to Canadians, by working with diaspora communities to make sure that we understand their concerns around marginalization and stigmatization. And the best way forward is for the Conservative Party of Canada to take the briefing. So a simple question, Mr. Speaker, through you to them, when will you take the briefing?
Officials with the Lethbridge Chamber of Commerce are reacting to the final result of Monday's provincial election. Cindy Bester, CEO of the Chamber, says from a business standpoint, there has been a lot of positive movement and change over the past 4 years involving the UCP government. Bester says affordability is one of the biggest issues which they're hearing, which they would like to see addressed by the province.
Utility costs, there's concerns about repayment of CEBA loans and things like that. So again, a lot of that is educating and working with municipal, provincial, and federal government. And now that we've had our city council in for over a year and a half, this new provincial government will be, up and running shortly. So we'll have some consistency. That's the other thing that our citizens haven't had. We have been election, over the last 4 years.
The UCP won a slim majority on Monday night, securing 49 seats compared to the NDP's 38. Lindsay Wilson is with a group called Alberta Proud, a host of Albertans who are passionate about many of the issues impacting our province. Wilson is also a social media influencer. She, like many of us, followed the recent provincial election quite closely. She says things may be tough for the UCP moving forward in areas where there's an orange wave, including the city of Edmonton.
I think the UCP has their work cut out for them. What can they do to bridge that gap? What can they do to appeal to these people and to find that soft middle ground, I guess, with the public sector unions and to champion Edmonton? And I mean, I think eventually, of course, every city wants money, and it's going to take, building a good, solid relationship with Mayor Amarjeet Sohi and seeing if they can make some positive contributions to some much needed infrastructure, schools, hospitals, that sort of thing. That's probably what it's going to take. But it's definitely concerning, because with how orange they've gotten up there, I think that puts Conservatives at a significant disadvantage.
Make sure you catch my full interview with Alberta Proud's Lindsay Wilson coming up after Business News. The mayor of Mississauga, Ontario, wants the federal government to change some of the lyrics for O Canada. Bonnie Crombie says the changes are necessary to advance reconciliation. Crombie wants the lyrics changed from "our home and native land" to "our home on native land." This comes after singer Julie Black made the exact change to the lyrics while singing O Canada at the NBA All-Star Game. The change was lauded by some and vilified by others. She'll be putting forward a motion to the federal government requesting the change. Public Safety Minister Marco Mendicino offered an update on the federal government's response to a suggested deadline from the inquiry into the 2020 mass shooting in Nova Scotia. Among the recommendations from the Mass Casualty Commission was that Ottawa and Nova Scotia have a body established to ensure mutual accountability in implementing all 130 recommendations from the MCC's final report.
The Commissioner also recommended that the Government of Canada and Nova Scotia work together to establish an independent body to monitor both progress in advancing the important findings as well as being transparent with Canadians as we move forward. And today, in response to that recommendation, I am very pleased to announce, along with my Nova Scotia counterpart, Minister Brad Johns, that we are creating the Progress Monitoring Committee and that retired Justice Linda Lee Oland will be appointed chair of that committee with an initial 1-year mandate.
Lethbridge police have charged a 38-year-old man in connection with a high-risk incident at a Northside home on Tuesday. Police were called to the residence along the 600 block of Stafford Drive after receiving a report about a man threatening a woman. When they arrived, the man confronted police with 2 hatchets. He then went back inside of the home and lit it on fire. Fire officials were able to quickly extinguish the blaze, and the man was arrested a short time later. Joe Zwart of Cowley faces various charges, including arson, possession of a dangerous weapon, and assaulting a peace officer. He remains in custody and is awaiting a bail hearing. The Chinese community in Lethbridge only has a few short weeks to figure out if they can help save a historic building in the downtown area of Chinatown. The Maney Opera Society building was set to be demolished, but a new proposal which was passed at Lethbridge City Council is giving them a shot at saving the structure. Video journalist Micah Quinn has the details.
We are losing Chinatown. I'm sorry.
Members of the Southern Alberta Chinese Association pleaded for more time to discuss potential options with the community and the owner of the Maney Opera Society building to see if it can be salvaged.
I was just heard about this news yesterday, so we are very shocked. That means we didn't have any chance to talk to anybody. Not to mention the owner of the building.
Earlier this year in January, the Boan Tong was destroyed by fire, and you can still notice the damage that the Maney Opera Society building sustained because of it. The facility was constructed in 1907 with a strong connection to the Chinese community in Lethbridge.
During 1907, when the residents of this community led a riot against the Chinese residents on Christmas Day 1907, that's the year this building was constructed. In the middle of discrimination, in the middle of prejudice, in the middle of being treated horribly by this community, they got together and built this building. And here, 116 years later, we have the chance to at least attempt to save it.
Staff from Lethbridge Fire and Emergency Services outlined the potential safety risks that vacant facilities like the Maney Opera Society building pose to the general public.
Some of our homeless individuals break in there and then they're doing whatever they do and an emergency event occurs, whether that's a structure fire, which then puts our men and women from Lethbridge Fire and Emergency Services at grave risk, going into these unsound buildings and having to rescue these individuals.
Lethbridge City Council gave a hard deadline of June 13th for members of the community and the owner of the Maney Opera Society building to figure out if there is a new way to save this historic part of our city's Chinatown. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
Lethbridge City Council also voted in favor of approving a feasibility study to look into whether the main pavilions of Exhibition Park can be used for recreational use instead of being torn down. A total of $50,000 will be given to conduct the study. Councillor Ryan Parker brought the motion forward. Councillors on both sides of the matter expressed their concerns.
There is a huge demand for indoor recreational facilities, more than just pickleball, but everything from pickleball to volleyball to indoor soccer. And actually, I do believe those facilities were used for soccer back in the day, and other things. It could be tennis, it could be an indoor walking track. So I think there's a huge need.
I think we can get halfway there just using the expertise we have here on staff to sort of understand if it is a good idea to even spend $50,000. I would just hate to throw away if administration could spend an hour or two and say, you know, once we open it up, there's going to be asbestos, there's going to be codes, there's going to be all the electrical. Then we have to do a contract to someone to operate it.
The CEO of the Lethbridge and District Exhibition, Mike Workington, has previously told Council that if the pavilions weren't taken down, they would cause tremendous strain on parking for the new Agri-Food Hub and Trade Centre. Pro-life needs to be back in the national conversation. That's according to a board member with Lethbridge Pro-Life, Dwayne Kaneinenbelt. Kaneinenbelt says there needs to be laws put in place to protect babies from full-term abortions.
We certainly have a lot of politicians today that don't want to talk about it. And if there are politicians who do, oftentimes media or people from other political parties target them and somehow try to label them as extremists for wanting to talk about this issue that affects all of us. But we do think it's important to continue to talk about it, to continue to make sure that people have the freedom to speak and to tell others that they think that people do have value. And so it's critical that we continue to guard our freedom of speech and talk on these issues, because it would be for the betterment of Canadian society if we put pro-life laws into place that protected the unborn and really then protected women.
Make sure you catch the full interview with Dwayne Kaneinenbelt from Lethbridge Pro-Life and BCN's Naveen Day coming up later in our broadcast. Well, we had sunshine mixed with clouds today, and it was fairly warm, but some rain may be on the way for southwestern Alberta. A complete look at the weather picture is coming up. Well, it was another beautiful day in Lethbridge, a nice one for a walk along the Old Man River. Jeanette Rocher is now with all of the weather details. Jeanette, some cooler temperatures, however, with some rain may be on the way for our region?
Yeah, it looks like by Friday and Thursday, we should be seeing teen temperatures, showers, clouds, the whole thing. Beginning this evening, actually, we are looking at a risk of a thunderstorm overnight. Overnight low of 13 degrees. Into Thursday, 19 degrees. We are seeing that chance of showers. And that should last right through until Friday. High of 17. Into Saturday, mainly cloudy skies, highs of 23, Sunday 28 with a mix of sun and cloud. Although last I looked, we could be seeing some rain, periods of rain develop by Sunday. As we get into Monday and Tuesday, also looking at some showers. So high of 23 on Monday, high of 22 degrees on Tuesday. We are seeing those intermittent showers all throughout the week, mixed with a little bit of sunshine here and there. So it's going to be a little bit of everything mixed with a lot of moisture. Average high for this time of year, 20. Average low, 7 degrees. 30 was our high temperature on this day back in 1956, and the record low was -1. That was back in 1982. Sun rose this morning at 5:29, and look at that. We're looking at 16 hours of daylight there. 9:29 for our sunset today. We're at 2 minutes longer of daylight than we were yesterday. On the west coast tomorrow, mainly sunny skies, although windy in the Juan de Fuca Strait. 19 degrees in Victoria. Same thing for Vancouver. Mainly sunny skies there. Okay, so we are seeing some thunderstorms develop over the Rocky Mountain foothills that happened earlier today, and they are intensifying as they are moving further east. So Edmonton this evening under a severe thunderstorm watch could see those risks of thunderstorms. 18, looking at showers throughout the day tomorrow. Same thing for Calgary. Could see some shower activity tomorrow with a high of 16 degrees. As we get into the rest of the prairies, also seeing some showers, high humid conditions there. Risk of a thunderstorm in Saskatoon and rain developing. 25 for a high there. 27 rather for a high in Regina. Looking at rain, a risk of thunderstorms there. 28 for a high in Winnipeg. Looking at shower activity and also a risk of a thunderstorm. High humidity levels, as I was mentioning before. In fact, in the Toronto area, we are looking at an air quality check as well, because the heat and high humid conditions are creating very high pollution levels. So that's really messing with the visibility and the air quality there. High of 31, mainly sunny skies. 33 for a high in Ottawa. Same thing for Montreal there. It is hot in central Canada, and those humidex levels are at 35 and 36. So extremely hot, humid conditions. 33 for a high in Fredericton as well, with the risk of showers there. Mainly sunny skies though in Halifax and Charlottetown. Look at those temperatures though, 32, 30 degrees. And St. John's, Newfoundland looking at only 11, but 19 as you move further inland, and a mix of sun and cloud there as well. So there you have it. That is your forecast.
Stats Canada says the economy beat expectations and grew at an annualized rate of 3.1% in the first quarter this year. Exports and household spending spurred growth. They were offset somewhat by declines in household investment and business investment in machinery and equipment. The economy's ongoing resilience will likely spur discussions of a potential rate hike as the Bank of Canada is expected to make its next interest rate announcement next week. National Bank of Canada reported a profit of $847 million for its second quarter that ended on April the 30th. Now that is down from a profit of $889 million a year earlier. The Montreal-based bank says it will now pay a quarterly dividend of $1.02 per share. That is up from 97 cents per share. A U.S. federal court ruling has cleared the way for OxyContin maker Purdue Pharma to settle thousands of legal claims over the toll of opioids. The ruling overturned a lower court's 2021 ruling that found bankruptcy courts did not have the authority to protect members of the Sackler family who own the company and who have not filed for bankruptcy protection from lawsuits. Members of the family will give up ownership of Purdue, which would become a new company. Its profits would then be sent to a fund to prevent and treat addiction. Family members would also contribute $5.5 to $6 billion over time, or about half of what the court found to be their collective fortune. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was down 167 points on the day to finish at 19,572. The Dow was down 134 points to 32,908. The S&P 500 was down 25 on the day to 4179. And the Nasdaq was also down 82 points to 12,935. West Texas Intermediate Oil was down $1.37 to $68.09 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 6 cents to $2.27 US. Gold was down 4 cents to $19.6270 US an ounce, and silver was even on the day at $23.49 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $11 per bushel, barley's at $8.77, canola's at $15, and corn is at $9.98 per bushel. Live cattle June contract was up 25 cents to $169.13. Feeder cattle August contract was up $1.40 to $239.18. And lean hogs June contract was up $1.75 to $82.58. The Canadian dollar was even over the past 24 hours at 73.67 US. Recapping one of our top stories, emergency officials say the fire danger is still quite high in the northern regions of Alberta. There are currently 64 active wildfires burning in the forest protection area. Of those fires, 18 are classified as out of control, 19 are being held, and 27 are under control. There is still very poor air quality in many areas north of Edmonton. There are 5 evacuation orders still in place, with just over 3,500 people evacuated. The province now has around 2,600 personnel battling the wildfires. Lindsay Wilson is the head of the Alberta group called Alberta Proud, a group of passionate Albertans who are quite vocal about many issues impacting our province. They now have around 250,000 Facebook followers. Lindsay is a social media influencer and conservative commentator who has some interesting insight into the recent Alberta election. She'll share some thoughts with us momentarily. Listen, if you see news happening in your community, be sure to drop us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. We'd love to hear from you. With the Alberta provincial election behind us, we wanted to chat with an Albertan who worked through social media and in-person events to bring awareness to the people of our province. Voter turnout was over 60%, with many Albertans feeling the issues of the day, including healthcare and the economy, and it made this election pivotal for the future of our province. Lindsay Wilson of Alberta Proud joins us now from Cochrane, Alberta, just outside of Calgary, to talk more about the results of Monday's election. Lindsay, welcome to Bridge City News.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm always happy to be here. Thank you.
Awesome, you're welcome. Now, what were your thoughts of the recent Alberta provincial election?
Well, from our perspective at Alberta Proud, we're a grassroots nonprofit advocacy group, and our number one focus is on advocating for our best in the world, Alberta energy, our Canadian energy. We take issue with celebrities and politicians who block and barricade our prosperity. And from our perspective, we've kind of seen this anti-energy, eco-radical movement extremist movement within a lot of the NDP candidates. And we think there's a lot of smoke and mirrors when Rachel Notley would say that she was standing up for our energy sector. We just don't believe it based on her history in her first term in office. So we were very pleased to see that Premier Danielle Smith and the UCP gets another opportunity. I took some bets that evening. I'd up my bet from 48 seats to 51. When I went to bed after I was down at UCP headquarters and I was on the True North live radio show on Andrew Lawton's show, we had such a great time. Huge shout out to those guys. They're excellent. And so we were doing the live results as they came in. And I left after Danielle Smith's victory speech. I went to bed. There was 52 seats. I woke up, there was 49. So definitely there's been, and we'll see in the days to come, but there's definitely some really close ridings and 2 automatic recalls so far.
Well, let's talk a bit about that. Back in 2019, it was a landslide majority for the Kenney government. 63 seats down to 49. So what does that say about what's happening here in our province? Some people think it's actually a good thing, even though it's a slim majority, will keep the party more accountable.
I would agree with that. And very quickly, I want to say it's 2 automatic recounts, not recalls. My bad. So I do think it's important that we have balance. Certainly, that's a loss of quite a number of seats. And right now we're sitting at 49. That could go plus or minus a seat or 2, but it is a majority. It is a slim majority. 44 seats were needed for a majority government. I'm pleased to see it's a majority government, though, and not a minority government, because I think that when there's a minority government, just not enough work gets done.
Lindsay, there were some notable numbers in this election. Voter turnout was quite high at 62%, and over 750,000 votes were cast in advance polling, which set a new record. It appeared as though Albertans were quite engaged this election. What are your thoughts?
I think they were. I hope that we're considering keeping in mind the population growth since 2019 when we talk about those numbers. Personally, I advance voted. I think it's a wonderful resource for us. We have really busy lives nowadays. I always encourage people to advance vote. You just never know what can happen in your own personal life on election day. I think people were really intrigued by the leader versus leader, right? So I think people, the NDP has been brilliant with their marketing, and they've centered their entire campaign around Rachel Notley, around Team Rachel Notley. That was on all their signs. And certainly Premier Danielle Smith, she's a little bit contentious by some voters. She was, so I think the personalities and I think that that's what intrigued people with this election rather than their cabinets so much and rather than their MLAs. I think just so much attention was drawn on Smith versus Notley. So I think that intrigued people. And I think as well as you have 2 polar opposite governments, the UCP and the NDP. Maybe several years ago, there's a few more similarities. I think that they've become so polar opposite. For me, it took a lot more than Rachel Notley putting on a blue blazer for a debate to show up that she's a conservative. So I think that you have one camp entirely on the right and one camp entirely on the left. And I think that I think when you have that polarization, it brings in kind of more that US style politics, and it captivates people and it makes for fancy headlines.
Let's talk about some of the advertising, as you mentioned, from the NDP. When I sat on the media panel at some of the forums here, we had a lot of constituents come to the front, use the mic and say, we're tired of the negative attack ads. It's getting to be draining. We're sick of them. Calling out some of the NDP candidates here. But then at the same time, many people suggest that those negative ads were actually quite effective for the NDP. What are your thoughts?
I actually think it backfired on the NDP. So we were talking about this on the True North radio show the other night, how you noticed around town, and it was blowing up all over social media. There was those big signs. It's that stormy, moody background and that look on Danielle Smith's face and what will she do next? And it was really genius. Whoever in the UCP thought to put up the little signs next to them that said, she'll cut taxes, she'll fix healthcare. So I think that it really backfired on them. I found that there was a turning point in this election, and that was the debate. And I think it's fair to say that Rachel Notley is a brilliant debater. She won her first term in 2015 based on that debate. But there's been some things happened, some things changed along the way. And I felt during that debate, there was a big anger machine that was coming forward. She interrupted Premier Danielle Smith a number of times, whereas Premier didn't interrupt her. She wasn't talking more about her record. She was focusing more on, the negative attacks on the UCP. And I think that really backfired on her. I think people have been through so much in this province, in the world, in the country in the last few years. We've come through this pandemic. It's been a real roller coaster politically. And the UCP focused on moving the province forward and on a positive vision. And Alberta is calling, like all their campaigns that they've run over the last 6 months or so have been really positive about Alberta's growth, about our energy sector, and of course, tying it in with standing up to Prime Minister Trudeau and standing up to Ottawa and that whole theme of more Alberta and less Ottawa. So attack ads can be fun if they're done well. And I can't overall criticize that the NDP hasn't had a really interesting history of doing some really brilliant social media campaigns. But I think they went too negative, and I think it backfired on them. And I think that's what won the UCP the election.
Now, the UCP's Jason Copping and Casey Madu are two cabinet ministers who lost their seats, Lindsay. Tyler Shandro, last time we checked, was behind 7 votes with a recount coming. So what are your thoughts on some of these high-profile candidates who lost their seats?
Well, I think it's going to be really interesting to see the shuffle in her cabinet for sure. There's also going to be an automatic recount in Calgary Glenmore for UCP MLA Whitney Isaac. She lost by, I think it's 30 votes is the margin there. So those two are automatic recounts. Another really interesting one, and that evening when we were doing the live election results on True North, we each picked a horse who we were watching to come in, and I was paying close attention to Banff Kananaskis MLA Miranda Rosin. Now, Miranda was up all night. She was up all night, and then she was in the middle of, I think, her victory speech when 4,000 advance votes from the NDP came in and totally turned the tables on that. So now there's a vote margin where the NDP candidate has won that at this time, and there's 199 vote margin. So I'm interested to see if there's going to be something happening there and if there's also going to be a recount there.
Both Edmonton and Calgary saw an increase in seats for the NDP. What do you think really led to this?
Edmonton is what we really have to watch for. I think the UCP, we lost Casey Madu's seat. We've lost everything in Edmonton. It's a stronghold of Orange. And I'm concerned that this is going to pit us versus them, or a rural versus urban, because there's a bit of a mix in Calgary. Certainly the NDP picked up some seats there, but they couldn't flip some really key ridings, which, they were hoping to do in order to be victorious that evening. But we've got a real problem when we know that there's kind of more of a left-leaning inside Edmonton. It's the capital, a lot of public sector jobs and that sort of thing. So I think the UCP has their work cut out for them. What can they do to bridge that gap? What can they do to appeal to these people and to find that soft middle ground, I guess, with the public sector unions and to champion Edmonton? And I think eventually, of course, every city wants money, and it's going to take, building a good, solid relationship with Mayor Amarjeet Sohi and seeing if they can, make some positive contributions to some much needed infrastructure, schools, hospitals, that sort of thing. That's probably what it's going to take. But it's definitely concerning, because with how orange they've gotten up there, I think that puts Conservatives at a significant disadvantage for an election in 4 years from now. And as you and I both know, 4 years goes by pretty quickly.
It certainly does, you bet. UCP leader Danielle Smith focused a lot on the economy and taxes, and the NDP and Rachel Notley talked a lot about healthcare and education. Do you think maybe the UCP did enough to convince Albertans that they are the party of choice when it comes to healthcare and education?
I think that is a work in progress. And I think when it comes to trust, I still think Albertans overall have more trust in Rachel Notley and the NDP when it comes to healthcare. But I think what really happened there and what really backfired is, and I know this just from talking to a ton of Alberta Proud people, a lot of people would come up to me and say, Lindsay, Danielle's going to make me pay for a doctor. It's a really, it was really negative attack campaigning, certainly. But what they did is they took a soundbite based on things that Premier Smith said before in her time when she was a radio talk show host for 6 years. She's been involved in the energy sector. She's been around politics for a really long time, of course. And as a champion for private sector, she's, of course, pontificated and tossed around different ideas based on the intention of how do we make, AHS is one of the most bloated bureaucracies out there. I think a 5-to-1 manager ratio capital. So we have, we've had some major spending problems there. And reining that in is really key. We can't just throw money at things to fix it. And so in previous years, Danielle Smith has come out talking about a semi-private system. that seems to scare Canadians a lot. I mean, we really do already have a two-tiered system. So doing things like giving people the option to not leave the country and pay for surgeries and cosmetics and different things like that here instead of leaving the country to do that and putting that, lining the pockets of other jurisdictions. There was a lot of good stuff in what she was saying, but the NDP just took a soundbite and they went with that. And she came out with her healthcare guarantee. Premier Smith came out with that healthcare guarantee. I think that was about a month ago, and said, no Albertan will ever have to pay out of pocket for a doctor. So the thing is it started to come to people that, oh, it's a lie. The NDP really largely campaigned on one big lie. Now, I'm not saying Danielle Smith has never talked about some form of private health care. That's not to abolish the public system, of course, but it was a lie that they came out with, and they championed that. And I think the UCP maybe could have, it's a hard balance. They took a focus on cutting taxes, making lives more affordable for Albertans, moving us forward. It's a strategy that worked for them. But I think, in her first 6 months, in all the work she's done with AHS, we've managed to get red alerts down in Edmonton and Calgary, I think, to zero, reducing wait times, reducing EMS times. So that's really positive. And I think the proof will just be in the pudding for Premier Smith and the UCP to show, hey, we're the government that's actually making real change and real difference to make sure that people get the health care they need.
Let's go back to the UCP leadership race for just a moment. How tight, how close it was between Travis Toews and Danielle Smith, with Smith coming out on top. Do you think this election would have looked a lot differently if Travis Toews would have been the leader of the UCP, more of a landslide victory? Or do you think maybe potentially the UCP would have lost because a lot of people looked at Travis Toews as just Jason Kenney 2.0?
Yeah, a lot of people said that. It was interesting. I had the great privilege with my friend Jamil Javani, former president of the CSFN network. We did an interview with the leadership candidates last fall. So we had all 7 of them all on stage, and we had 15 minutes with each of them. And I can say they're all such experienced, kind, incredible people. And I think that Premier Smith certainly has set a tone when she first came into office 7 months ago, and she gave a cabinet position to 5 out of 6 of her fellow leadership candidates. I think that was her saying, hey, we need to unify. We need to move this forward. Strategically, I think that was very smart. And I think through this campaign, through the last 30, 40 days, you've seen a lot of Brian Jean, you've seen a lot of Rebecca Schultz, especially down and around the Calgary area. And I think that effectively worked really well for the UCP. And it showed that this is the team that you can trust. Would it have looked different under Travis Toews? Yeah, I think it would have looked really different. I wonder how the unity would have worked in the back rooms. I'm really not sure, because that's kind of more that era of that Kenney era. And it's still divisive. Conservatives still need to work within. We still need to all unite for the same goal: a better Alberta, restoring the Alberta advantage, protecting our energy sector from Justin Trudeau and just transition. And I think if people can just drop their ego a little bit and work and push forward, I'm hoping that Danielle Smith was the right choice. And we're behind her at this time.
So, Lindsay, we only have a few short moments left here, but I wanted to ask you, what do you think will be the first order of business for the newly elected UCP?
I think that Premier Smith alluded to that very clearly in her victory speech, which was setting the tone with Ottawa, setting the tone with Prime Minister Trudeau. The fact is that we have something called just transition looming. It's actually something right out of the Rachel Notley NDP playbook circa 2015, where they actually use the term just transition. So the federal government thinks at this time that it's a great idea to just transition our best in the world energy, our high-paying oil and gas jobs for, quote, green energy jobs, whatever that means. I guess it means installing solar panels or something. And that is a huge, huge risk. So I think that Premier Smith is going to get tough. I think we're going to see a lot of united front with her and Premier Scott Moe. Interesting point. Premier Scott Moe is, I think, the second most popular premier in the country right now. And he's getting praise for the Saskatchewan First Act and, putting Saskatchewan in charge of their resources, putting Saskatchewan first over Ottawa. He's getting praised for the same things that Premier Smith has been heavily, heavily criticized for. So I think people don't need to be scared of the Sovereignty Act. They don't need to be afraid of these things. It's just about putting Alberta first. Enough is enough. The Trudeau government continues to show us that they don't care about us, that they think our best in the world energy is in fact bad. And I think that that's going to be the first order of business, is moving forward on some of those fronts. I'm really excited to see what's going to come out of this and kind of having that united Western front.
So, Lindsay, if folks want more information about Alberta Proud, how should they best get a hold of you?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So we have one of the biggest social media followings of our kind. We post a lot of really funny stuff on social media. Perhaps I think I'm funnier than more super left leaning people think I am. But anyways, you can follow us on all our social media channels. You can find us Alberta Proud. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. You can reach out to me, lindsay.wilson@strongandproud.ca, and you can purchase some Alberta Proud merch online at shop.albertaproud.org.
There you go. Lindsay Wilson of Alberta Proud, thanks so much for joining us today from Cochrane, Alberta.
Thank you so much.
Abortion continues to be a contentious issue around the world and here in Canada. Joining us today to discuss some of these issues is Dwayne Konynenbelt. He is a board member of Lethbridge Pro-Life as well as Elsie's House. Dwayne, welcome to Bridge City News.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here today.
Excellent. So let's touch base on some of the abortion issues. Why is it that the majority of Canadian society seems supportive of abortion?
Well, I think sometimes it's based on the way that we frame the questions that we ask the people when we do these surveys. We certainly find that there are many pro-life issues where most Canadians agree. If you take issues like late-term abortion or sex-selective abortion, you'll find that most Canadians agree that those things are wrong. I also believe that when we get the pro-life message out and we try to tell people that we believe that people have value from conception until natural death, that basic idea that all people have value because they're created in the image of God is a great way to run a society. It gives everybody equal rights in all situations, and it's a great way to move forward. And so I think sometimes when it's framed that way, then it's very quickly people tend to agree with pro-life positions.
Right, so you're talking about the way things are framed. So when people are asked, do you support women's rights or do you support the right to choose, most people will say yes. But what exactly is the choice that we're talking about here?
Well, that's exactly right. Obviously, we support women and we support people to have choice, but there are some choices that we believe we can't make when they affect other people. And so in the pro-life cause, we think it's very important for people to understand that the unborn is human. So when we're talking about choice in this case, that there's more than one person. And so when someone says, you know, my body, my choice, I think they're missing that there's another body involved here, there's another person. And when we recognize that there's another person, then suddenly the whole argument changes. So of course we support choice, of course pro-life people are very supportive of women's rights, and we think women deserve better than abortion. We think abortion is hurtful to them, and we'd like to live in a world where they have every opportunity to be wonderful mothers and parents.
So you're talking about women's rights. Part of a good pro-life campaign would probably be to communicate to the public that you're not anti-women. So how is the pro-life movement actually supportive of women?
Sure. Well, the pro-life movement often has been accused of being anti-woman, but when you look at the movement itself, you'll find again that the people involved with it who feel that everyone has value are very supportive of women and all the things that they do. Here in Lethbridge, part of the way we do that, of course, is through the programs and support that we offer to the people here in Southern Alberta. We do run a place called Elsie's House, where women who find themselves in crisis pregnancies can go for support. And in all that we do, we try to do it in love, showing that we believe that there's a better way forward than abortion.
Now, a big part of the debate is at what point human life begins. Like, when is the fetus considered a human being with the same rights as a baby on the other side of the womb? Is it a heartbeat, or is it a certain term, a certain part of the pregnancy term?
Right. And I do know that there's a lot of people in our society that try to frame that as a main kind of a talking point today. But I think if you look at our embryology textbooks, it's pretty clear that at the moment of conception, something happens where now it's no longer this foreign entity, but it's a human being on its track to being, it's fully human at that point with great potential. And so that's what we believe. We don't think this is an argument at all. I think the average person, if they understand anything about science, know that life begins at conception and it ends at death. And so these are sometimes people who are trying to distract from the real issue. But, the moment I was created, that was me. When I was in my mother's womb, that was me. And when I was a kid, that was me, and now it's me. And if you were to go back in time and try and find a moment when I became me, it would be the point of conception. And so we like to stand by that. We think it's scientific, philosophical, it makes sense. And people who are trying to say that, there's some magical point, when someone becomes human, when they either go through the process of birth or when suddenly their heart starts beating. We don't buy those arguments. We think it's a very sound scientific argument that life begins at conception.
Now, I understand that a majority of Canadians do support limitations on late-term abortions, but politicians seem to shut down any attempts to legislate this. It isn't a conversation many people want to have, so why is it important to keep this topic as part of the public discussion, and how can we encourage people to discuss this rationally?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question. We certainly have a lot of politicians today that don't want to talk about it. And if there are politicians who do, oftentimes media or people from other political parties target them and somehow try to label them as extremists for wanting to talk about that issue that affects all of us. But we do think it's important to continue to talk about it, to continue to make sure that people have the freedom to speak and to tell others that they think that people do have value. And so it's critical that we continue to guard our freedom of speech and talk on these issues, because it would be for the betterment of Canadian society if we put pro-life laws into place that protected the unborn and really then protected women.
Now let's talk to us about Elsie's House, which provides a safe place for new moms or moms-to-be.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because sometimes people say that, people who are pro-life never do anything to support women or the children. And that's clearly not the case. If you look around the community programs here in Canada, many pro-life groups are involved in many different ways. Elsie's House is a program that we started about maybe 3 or 4 years ago now. It's named after a wonderful lady who used to work for Lethbridge District Pro-Life and volunteered for many years. It's a place where if there are women who find themselves in crisis pregnancy and they don't have any place to turn, they can come to us in Elsie's House. And we not only provide them or work alongside them for room and board, but we provide them the programs to help them mentally, physically, spiritually move forward, to prepare to become mothers, prepare to become someone who's going to raise a child and to live independently and to find success. And so they come to us, they go through a number of programs, they live with us all the way through the birth, they stay with us for a few months, and then they transition into their own apartment and into independent living. And we try and come alongside them through the whole process. We do it because we are a Christian organization who loves the Lord Jesus Christ, but we allow everyone to come through the program. And we've had ladies from many different faith backgrounds or no faith at all come through and benefit from the program. And in all those cases, it's been a blessing to everyone involved.
Now, you said that the women are staying at Elsie's House for a few months. How many moms are able to be cared for at Elsie's House?
Sure. So right now we just have one location in Lethbridge, and in the home we can have up to 3 ladies. We have had that before. Normally there's 2 that are in there. That's kind of the ideal situation for the space that we have. We like them to come as early as they can when they know that they find themselves in this crisis pregnancy. It gives us the most opportunity to prepare them for motherhood. And then most times, depending again on the situation, within a few months, they're moving out after their child is born. But again, that's a general rule. There are some ladies that have had more needs that stay longer. There are some have had less needs that stay for a shorter period of time. It just depends on the client. There is clearly a demand for housing and help in this area in Lethbridge. We're currently looking for another location to grow it. But in all of these things, of course, there's cost and time, and we really want to move forward right so that we make sure we're providing a situation where they're loved. There are a lot of unique needs of ladies who find themselves in these situations. And we're very thrilled that we've been able to partner with many local and government organizations. This seems to be a home that crosses the pro-life, pro-choice line. These are women who want to keep their children, and we're all on board helping them. So that's wonderful to see that we're all working together. The government agencies are very supportive with their programming and clients and programs that we're allowed access to. And so we're very thrilled that we can work together with a lot of people on this.
And is there a cost to stay at the home?
So when the ladies come to us, there's an application process that we go through to see if they're eligible. It's not a criteria where we say if you can't afford, you can't come in. We try to use the criteria to say, would our programs benefit you? And if it will, we'll find a way to get you in here and to get you into the program. Now, there are some people that do have financial supports from the government and elsewhere. And so then certainly we would use those funds to help, welcome the ladies in and go towards their room and board. But it is not a criteria. So some pay some pay none. It absolutely depends on the case. But we're supported by our very generous donors. And so there is opportunity when they can't afford for us to give them the financial support that they need.
And so does Elsie's House need any volunteers, or do they need baby item donations?
Yeah, so it was kind of interesting through the COVID years. It was very difficult to get volunteers in and to have people in the community help out. But obviously there is a need for volunteers and for helpers. We have a number of wonderful volunteers already that might drive ladies to doctor's appointments, or some of them still have jobs, some of them might be still in school. So help out with all of those things when the baby is born. Some help, care for the child or go through the programs with the mothers. If there was someone who's interested, they could go to our website, elsieshouse.com. And on that website, there is a form for volunteers to fill in. And then at any point in time, people who think it's a good program can donate. They can do that online. And that's kind of how things go. But we've been very blessed that when we present this need to the people of Southern Alberta, people from, like I say, pro-life, pro-choice, love what we're doing and are very generous to the program. And we're so thankful for that.
That's amazing to hear. Now, how can a woman get involved and stay at Elsie's House? Is there a waiting list? And is there a need for more places like this?
Yeah, so just like there's an application online for a volunteer, there's also an application online for someone who may think that they right now need a place to stay and are interested in hearing about it. But of course, there's also a phone number, and you can talk to our executive director right away. And I wouldn't say that there's a waiting list as such. We try to assess the needs, and if there is a need, help in some way. But yeah, currently when there's 3 ladies in the home, then unfortunately we don't have more spots right now. And I guess then that would be a waiting list. But we are kind of, when there's a big push, and we're very close to that, we do have the staff in place where we could rent another home and move forward in expanding the program.
Now, turning our attention back to Lethbridge Pro-Life, can you just tell us how the funds are raised and how they're spent? Because I know there's been some controversy in the past about some of the pro-life advertisements in Lethbridge.
Yeah, about 5 years ago, we had a bit of a disagreement with the city of Lethbridge over whether or not they would place our ads on the buses and bus benches. So we went to court, and thankfully we won all 5 cases, 5 counts against the city of Lethbridge. And so the judge was very clear that government elected officials, their job is to protect our freedom of speech. And so they have a responsibility not to count on outside agencies to try to, say which ads they can and cannot put up. As elected officials, they need to defend our freedom of speech. And since then, there's never been any issues, and it's been wonderful. And we've always tried to do our ads, of course, in love and compassion for all of those. But we certainly believe we have freedom to speak our minds on this position. And even if people disagree with our position, it doesn't mean we don't have the right to express it. So that's been a real blessing to us. Of the funds that we raise, we do have some staff that work on the support of all of our groups around City of Lethbridge. We do some advertising. do give some scholarships and some activities for young people. But the majority of our expense right now, of course, is Elsie's House. Takes quite a chunk of funds to run that program, to employ the staff, and especially as we want to move forward. And so that's kind of how we use the money.
This topic is often discussed about from a women's perspective, but let's talk about men's rights for a moment here, because men are parents too. What resources would a male have if his female partner wants an abortion, but he wants to keep the child? What resources would he have?
Well, that's a very difficult situation to be in right now, because obviously we give a lot of autonomy to the woman in this situation. And I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm just saying that's the situation we find ourselves in. But you've really brought up a good point, that this is not just a women's issue. This is something that affects all of us. It affects fathers and mothers. And so oftentimes when we talk about Elsie's House, we'll say young ladies and families who find themselves in crisis situations, because we realize there's a lot more people involved than just the lady here. And again, we believe that when you do believe that people have value from conception until natural death, and we all have equal rights, that recognizes that there's a lot of other people who are affected by this issue. And so there are many resources that you can find if you go to lethbridge.org. There are some resources for people who find themselves in that situation. Or again, you can call us and we can come alongside you and try and help through those situations, because they can be very, very difficult.
Well, we're just about out of time, but very quickly, Dwayne, can you just tell our viewers about the annual Hike for Life event that is happening this Saturday, June 3rd at Henderson Lake Park in Lethbridge?
Well, it's a wonderful event. It's our big annual fundraiser. It's a celebration of life. It's for all people who kind of agree with what I've been talking about here today. It starts at 9 a.m. It's at the Kiwanis Shelter at Henderson Lake. We usually get about 400 or 500 people come out. We start with donuts and juice, and then people hike around the lake. A lot of them are donors themselves or have raised money through sponsorships. So it is a fundraiser for us, but some people come just to be part of it and support us. And then when we're done, we have T-shirts, we have hot dogs, there's games for the kids, face painting, balloons, there's a bouncy castle. It's a celebration of life. There's nothing controversial about it. Money raised goes to support our causes and Elsie's House. And it's a wonderful day and the kids have a great time. And yeah, we hope people who share our core values on that will celebrate life with us on Saturday at Henderson.
Dwayne Kinainen-Belt is a board member of Lethbridge Pro-Life and Elsie's House. Thanks so much for being with us today, Dwayne.
My pleasure.
I'm Naveen Day. On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, thanks for watching.